This is episode 16 of the Shame Proof Your Life podcast, the one where I talk about my little sister. I'm your host and shame coach, Danita Bremer. Have you ever received a prompting that you ignored for a long time, like 17 years? This podcast is that for me. I'm telling my stories, I'm learning from my past, and I'm inviting you along for the ride because I know my story can help others. Okay, you guys, I am learning so much from this class that I enrolled in. It's a class called Exploring Shame with Exquisite Gentleness. It's run by a woman named Sarah Peyton. And if you're interested, because I know I'm not going to do justice to describing what I'm learning here, I will put links to her site and to the class that I'm in. So if you want to learn more, you can absolutely do that. But I'm learning so much about what shame is and how it functions and the neuroscience of it and how to overcome it. So I'm only going to walk through one exercise that I learned yesterday. But there really is so much that I'm learning about the right hemisphere brain versus the left hemisphere brain and how shame lives in the left hemisphere, and shame is like this alarmed aloneness, and it's like a long-term grudge against yourself, and the work is to be able to allow someone to accompany you in your shame and to for yourself to soften the grudge against yourself. So that is the very, very, very short version. But I really am enjoying it, and I'm learning so much and learning a lot about myself. And I am really feeling a lot of things shift. And I think this is an example of when everything kind of conspires in your favor because I have this class going on that I'm learning about shame and how to approach it with this gentleness and this love. And, in some ways, that's really hard because I'm used to approaching myself and my shame with harshness. And it makes me very emotional when I show up to these classes and I participate in these exercises. And it's like someone being so gentle and loving and kind. It's like the thing I never knew I needed. And there are other life stuff happening that just happens to be going on at the same time. But now that I think about it, I'm like, yeah, I don't know that that is really so much of a coincidence as it is the world showing up to help me heal where I need to be healed. So I am going to tell a story today, and then I'm going to walk you through an exercise that I learned from Sarah Peyton, and I'm probably not going to do it justice, like I said. So I do encourage you, if this resonates with you or shifts things at all for you, I encourage you to go check out her website and enroll in the class because it has been very helpful for me. I'm sure it would be helpful for you. So the story I want to tell today is takes place before my mom died, probably around 22 years ago. My little sister, who is about 11 years younger than me, I think she was 8 or 9 at the time. And basically, I was living in Seattle away from home, about 5-hour drive away from home. And I believe it was during the summer, and somehow between my parents and I and my boyfriend at the time, we invited my little sister to come spend a week with us in Seattle. And I don't really remember much about that week. I have this theory that whenever I have an experience that causes a lot of shame for me, maybe we could even call it kind of a traumatic experience, whether I bring it on myself or somebody else does. It's like my brain fuzzes all the memories. And so I do remember this specific experience, but I don't remember really like what was going on the rest of the week. So I apologize for that. But I do know that she was visiting us and that all three of us, me, my sister, and my boyfriend, got in the car. And I believe we were going to Costco. And we get to Costco and we park. And then my sister decides she's going to refuse to get out of the car. I don't remember why. She just refused. And how old was I? I think I was 19 at the time. I didn't really know if that was appropriate to leave an 8 or 9-year-old alone by herself in a car in a parking lot while we go in and shop. And so I didn't feel comfortable with that. And I'm trying to get her to come out of the car and I'm getting really frustrated with her. And I like yelled at her words that are so terrible. I do not even want to repeat them here. Like, very, very hurtful words. Probably like the most hurtful thing I could say to anyone. And as soon as those words came out of my mouth, I regretted it. I knew it was a mistake and I felt so much shame, like just crying, ball in my throat, red face, hot, like the whole thing of like, I just felt like I was a terrible sister and not even just a terrible sister, but a terrible person, which is exactly what shame will do to you. It will take your actions and tell you that you are your actions and that your actions mean that you are somehow a flawed, broken person. That is it. That's the memory. It's not complicated. It's just me and my boyfriend standing there witnessing and my little sister being very stubborn, and she was a big kid. Like, I think we tried to force her, like physically force her to come out of the car. But she was not dainty and that wasn't easy and it was just so hard. And as I think back on all the experiences I've had in my life, and especially the ones that have created a lot of shame for me, this is definitely one of the ones that I still feel a ton of shame around, even today. So, when I was in this class with Sarah Peyton yesterday, she asked us to think of a memory from our past where we felt immense shame and to go back to that memory. And so, some people may not be able to do this. You may not feel comfortable to go back to the memory. I was able to do this. So I'm going to walk you through it using my memory. Um, but I do want to encourage you that this may not be something that you can do on your own. You may need somebody to walk you through it, and that's okay. But I do want to just kind of explain my experience with this tool that she gave to us. So I go back to the memory and I can see myself standing. It was actually like an extended cab truck. So the truck door was open and the seat was pulled forward, and my little sister was in the back. And I'm standing there trying to convince her to come out of the car, out of the truck. And the first thing we do is we just freeze the memory. So it's like you're watching a movie of it and then you just hit pause. And we put everyone except for me, except for yourself, in like this safe golden bubble. That's how Sarah Peyton describes it. So we freeze her, and then we're just looking at me in the memory. And the point of this memory is to help yourself. If shame is kind of a turning away from yourself, it's to help yourself turn back toward yourself, this inner child inside of you in that moment where the shame was created. So Sarah Payton said that shame, one way to think of it is a long-term grudge against yourself. And in your right brain, you have this sort of inner child, this version of you, your selfness that is fully and wholly you. And when you feel shame, that happens in your left brain and you turn away from yourself. You say to yourself like I can't look at this. I can't be with this. This is not okay. And you judge yourself. And in the judging of yourself, you turn away from yourself. Okay? And this exercise is meant to go back to that memory where the shame was created and to try to just start turning back toward yourself or softening toward yourself. So I was able to get to compassion for myself and like fully turn toward myself and feel so compassionate. But not everybody else was able to do that. And all we're really trying to do here is kind of crack the door open to a turning toward self and a softening toward self. So once you're in this memory and you have it sort of frozen, and everyone else is kind of in this golden bubble, whoever is there with you. So I would also put my boyfriend in the golden bubble and kind of freeze them. And then we're just looking at what's happening for me. And we're looking at these different layers of context. So the first layer of context is in the moment when I'm yelling at my little sister, what is happening for me? And for me, it was like so much frustration and like resistance. Like I really wanted her to do what I wanted her to do. So maybe control. Right? And that all doesn't soften anything for me. I'm like, yeah, I know that. So then we go to the next layer out, the next ring out of context. What was going on for my little sister? And as I examine that in my mind, I think, oh man, she must have been really struggling. I don't quite have a grasp on why or what she was struggling with, but my adult self can see her child self clearly was struggling, clearly was fighting against something that really had nothing to do with me. That maybe helps me soften a little bit. But as I even go out another layer to another layer of context, what was happening in my family with my mom and my dad and my other sister and like the whole family dynamic? Why was she even visiting us for the week? And I kind of think back to like, oh, that must have been, my parents must have been struggling. I don't think I quite knew the extent of their problems at this point in time. But now, as I have the perspective of looking back, I think, yeah, they must have been really struggling at the time. There must have been stuff going on at home that I didn't really know about. That might have influenced my little sister and how she was responding to me. And as I look at myself in that context, what came up for me was I felt immense pressure. I'm the oldest. I'm taking care of my little sister. I've got this like responsibility. I can see how I was trying to help and without really knowing what was going on or how I could even help, but I felt this pressure to like make things right and to take some of the burden off of my parents. And then there was the context of my boyfriend, who, you guys, I married that boy. He's amazing. But in that moment, I felt pressure coming from him as well because he had his own thoughts and feelings about the situation and what was right and what was wrong. And I immensely respected him and wanted to like do what was right for him too. I mean, he so graciously allowed my little sister to come visit. And I don't mean that to mean like it was up to him, but we together decided that and that was, she came into his home as well. And I felt pressure from that angle too of him feeling frustrated and him having some judgments. and kind of wanting him to not have judgments and trying to like in a way fix that. And I think that thinking of all of these things that were going on for my family and my relationship with my boyfriend and my relationship with my sister, that is when I was able to really soften toward myself and to just feel so much compassion come up for me in that moment 22 years ago. And the other thing that I realized was that that may have been the moment when I stopped trusting myself with my own words because those really harsh, hurtful words felt like they just fell out of my mouth, like I had no control over them. And in a way, I didn't. I was allowing my emotions, the frustration and the judgment and the pressure to get to me because I didn't have these tools back then. And so I feel so much compassion and love toward me in that moment 22 years ago. And I can almost feel it loosening this, I think, this unconscious rule that I made for myself in that moment that I would never speak up without first thinking or something like that. I haven't quite been able to put my finger on it, but something about me speaking up and like filtering it so that I don't hurt other people. So that's kind of the tool is to go back to the moment and freeze everything and just really examine what is going on for yourself and start internally what's going on for you internally, but you can go out even further than that. You can go out to like what's happening in the outer culture and patriarchy or racism or money, like socioeconomic things. Like what are all the influences going on in your life that conspired against you in that moment to make you do the thing that you did that then made you feel the shame, right? And in the moment, we didn't, I know I didn't, and I'm assuming you also didn't have the capacity to be like, oh, yeah, I'm feeling all this pressure and this frustration because of this, and this, right? Like all these reasons. No, it was just, oh my gosh, I said this terrible thing. I'm a terrible person. I'm a terrible sister. I should like go crawl in a hole. Right. And so it's sort of revisiting yourself and really examining all of the context. And can you turn more toward yourself? Can you soften? Can you understand? Can you accompany yourself in that moment? I know that's a lot. If you have any questions, please reach out. I'm happy to have a conversation or answer questions about my own experience or what I'm learning. Um, but I just felt so compelled to share that with you because I had so many light bulb moments going through this experience. And if you feel like you need someone to accompany you in this, I would be happy to do that. Go to my website, sign up for a free session, and we'll do it. Okay, that's enough for now, and so are you. Until next time, go be you and follow the spirit. I would be ever so grateful if you would rate, review, and share the podcast because here's the thing with shame it always wants to hide. You never know who is struggling with shame, with that long term grudge against themselves. But rating, reviewing, and sharing the podcast might help someone you had no idea needed it. I would also love to continue the conversation. Come find me on Instagram or Facebook at Danita Bremer Coaching.